You are the sunshine of my life. That's why I'll always be around. You are the apple of my eye. Forever you'll stay in my heart. I feel like this is the beginning. Though I've known you for 1,000,000 years, and if I thought our love was willing, I'd find myself drowning in my own tears. You are the sunshine of my life. That's why I'll always be around. This is the beginning. Though I've known you for 1,000,000 years, and if I thought our love was willing, I'd find myself drowning in my own tears. You are the sunshine of my life. That's why I'll always be around.
I'm a gonna live till I die. I'm gonna laugh instead of cry. I'm gonna take the town and turn it upside down. I'm gonna live, live, live till I die. They're gonna say, what a gal. I'm gonna play for the sky. Ain't gonna miss a thing. I'm gonna have my fling. I'm gonna live, live, live till I die.
I'm going to live till I die. I'm going to laugh till I die. That's my mantra. I'm going to live until I die. You got a mantra? They're really cool. You ought to have one because they help you remember shit that you would otherwise forget. So what's going on? I haven't looked at a paper in several months. Anything going on out there?
That's all about you, Carol.
There is shit flying everywhere. I know, but I'm cool because I'm telling you I have seen that shit before. Now, I'm no longer pretty or talented or young or smart. I don't know where I was going with that. But I am actually feeling so optimistic that I went out and bought green bananas. And that's not something you do a lot at my age. That's right, I am so old.
How old are you?
We've rehearsed that a lot. It didn't come out quite. I am so old.
How old are you?
I am so old that when I was in grammar school, they didn't have history classes. It was all current events. And we didn't know what memes were. It was all hieroglyphics. So, but today there's a 24-hour news cycle. I mean, you can get the news on your watch, on your telephone. You can ask Siri or Alexa or the guy sitting next to you. It's fires, riots, car wrecks in Los Angeles. And in Washington, a totally different kind of train wreck. You know, it can be overwhelming. So it's important to chill. It won't be easy, but the world will not end tomorrow. It will pass. You know, it's probably my imagination, probably my age that confuses people into thinking I'm an adult. But it's tough being 60. Would you believe 70? Okay. I mean, well, he gave me an 80th birthday party, and then they put 90 candles on it, and we had to call the goddamn fire department. Anyway, here I am with my 40-year-old brain having a tug-of-war with my 91-year-old body. My brain keeps saying, come on, we can do that. And my body says, are you out of your fucking mind? And just to be clear, if you see someone my age jogging, it isn't exercise, it's diarrhea. So last month I went to an antique store to buy a gift, and they wouldn't let me leave. They put a price tag on me. But I used to be young. I think then, didn't we all? These days, everything sags. I mean, my ass is relocated to another zip code. And my breasts have sagged so much, they genuflect more than a Catholic nun, so can't win. But I did find an online dating service for super seniors. It's called Carbon Dating. But I'm fighting it. Kind of like a salmon swimming upstream, but a little too old to spawn. 2 years ago, I was much younger then. I went zip lining in Costa Rica with a male friend. It was really great, very exciting. But when we got back to LA, the guy walked away from me instantly, thinking I was going to kill him. So that didn't work out too well. But last year I went down in a submersible 1,000 feet off of Venezuela, the island of Curacao. Someone's here who went with me. Me. 1,000 feet, that's like 3 football fields in length. It was really exciting. It was amazing what you could see down there. But asked me to climb to my seat at the Hollywood Bowl? Not going to happen. Thanks, Ron. It's Ron Coleman. And Ron Coleman. When I was a kid, centuries ago, we had ice boxes to keep our food from spoiling, and it was before refrigerators and freezers. The Iceman would come up in his truck and bring these cakes of ice that they'd put into our ice box to keep all of the food chilled. During the hot summer months, they would chip off little pieces of ice for us kids to suck on. But today, these icemen have been replaced by very unfriendly, masked, armed ice agents. You love that transition, right? And while rounding up criminals is probably a really great idea, they're also rounding up a lot of good people, neighbors, people we've known for years, for decades. And clearly, this new breed, they're not delivering ice, they're just delivering fucking terror. I think we'd all agree when governments start rounding up people, locking them up or shipping them off without due process, it's bad. But it's not new. I know because I've seen this shit before. In the 1930s and 1940s, the Nazis did it across Europe. And 10 million people, enemies of the state, were slaughtered, including homosexuals, gypsies, and 6 million Jews. And blacks. After the Civil War, there was actually a congressional proposal to take all 4 million ex-slaves and ship them to Oklahoma and make Oklahoma a Negro state. And they might have gone ahead and done that, except they found oil. And all of a sudden, the white guys thought, that's probably not a good idea. In 1942, our government rounded up all of the Japanese Americans and put them into internment camps. These families had lived in Torrance and Gardena, San Pedro, Long Beach, for decades. They were given 2 days. Sell your house, close your business, pack up, you aren't Americans anymore. Then they turned to another minority, and they began rounding up flashy dressed Latino boys who were wearing what they called zoot suits. The boys were called pachucos, a very derogatory term, and the government gave them 2 choices, jail or the army. And again in 1954, there was Operation Wetback. Hard to believe it was actually called Operation Wetback. Nearly 500,000 Latinos were rounded up, put in cages, and deported. And that president, Eisenhower, we all thought he was a pretty rational guy. So what next? Let's round up all the old Jews and send them back to Boyle Heights. We're going to send the gays back to San Francisco and the blacks back to the Deep South. You know, I thought all these roundups might actually ease traffic on the 405. It never happened. It's been a hell of a week. This week we've seen the killing of a young, popular conservative guy in Utah. And they found a 13-year-old boy up in Washington with 24 assault weapons and guns made by a 3D printer and ammunition and a lot of writings about mass killing in schools. Then they had a school shooting in Colorado where a couple of people were killed in a place not far from Columbine, which was one of the first school mass shootings a couple decades ago. And firearms have become the leading cause of death for kids under 18. Crazy. There are now more than 500 million privately owned weapons in the United States. 500 million. And more than 20 million assault weapons. You know, our belief in the sanctity of the Second Amendment is just incredible. Anyway, aside from that, I thought I should try and become part of the new Gen group, you know, the Gen Z group. So we spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to be modern. And we kept looking for a letter like Gen X or Gen Y to define all of those that were north of 90, and we couldn't find anything. So we've settled on using Roman numerals, which makes me an XCI, and I swear I don't feel a day older than LXXX. But I've gathered some emails and letters to share with you. The first letter is from Bumfuck, Iowa, from Mr. Fred Figplucker.
Carol, what's happening to our country? It seems the good old USA is going to pot. I mean, when I was a young boy, we worked on our farm all week, slopped the hogs, went to church on Sunday, and then listened to Amos and Andy on the radio. I heard those two Negro boys was really white. Is that true?
Thanks, Fred. They actually were white. Actual Negroes at that point in time had no jobs in radio. But Fred's world probably would have never considered such things. Anyway, 4 days after my 8th birthday, the world turned upside down. The Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor over in Hawaii, and suddenly our country was at war. Fathers, uncles, older brothers, all donned khaki uniforms, and small flags with gold stars were hung in living room windows in all those homes where family members had gone off to war.
That certain night, the night we met, there was magic above in the air. There were angels dining at the Ritz, and the nightingale sang in Berkeley Square. I may be right, I may be wrong, but I'm perfectly willing to swear that when you turned and smiled at me, the nightingale sang in Berkeley Square.
I know it was a long time ago, but then again, not quite that long. Those were your parents and grandparents, the ones who kissed you, who tucked you in at night, and who worked their asses off to give you a better life.
The moon that frown. How could he know we two were so in love? The whole darn world turned upside down.
These same people, your parents, your grandparents, and relatives, nearly half of them had been unemployed for a decade during the Great Depression. And now the entire world was suffering, and people were hungry for a way to put Humpty Dumpty together again. Socialism, fascism, communism, democracy. Nothing was working, and now we were at war. Bubblegum disappeared from store shelves. Do any of you even remember what bubblegum was? Meanwhile, coffee and sugar were rationed. Gas was rationed. Lucky Strike cigarettes in tin green packages were suddenly put into paper with a commercial, Lucky Strike Green goes to war. You see, everyone smoked in those days. Girls wore penny loafers and poodle skirts. Boys were figuring out how to get to second base, and we're not talking baseball. And at night I was warned to pull these heavy black drapes across my window in case enemy airplanes flying overhead would look in. Could never figure out why they'd want to do that.
The streets of town were paved with stars. It was such a romantic affair. And as we kissed and said goodnight, the nightingale sang in Berkeley Square.
We all thought that we were the good guys and that we were united in defeating the bad guys. It was all pretty clear, except it wasn't. You see, our form of government hadn't worked very well during the Depression, and a lot of people argued whether Hitler's Germany was better or worse than Stalin's Russia. You see, a lot of important adults, they liked Hitler. Henry Ford, Charles Lindbergh, William Randolph Hearst. They led more than 20,000 sympathizers goose-stepping into Madison Square Garden. Go figure. But President Roosevelt, he promised us that democracy was the right path. And in those days, we believed what our government told us. President Roosevelt he was like God. He would never lie to us. Walter Cronkite would never lie to us, or Chet Huntley, David Brinkley, Edward R. Murrow. You see, in those days, the news was truth. It was inviolable. It was not yet entertainment. Truth was clear. If the president wanted us to go to war, we went to war. Today, it's a shit show. Fox tells one truth, MSNBC another, and our president a third. Tariffs.
Good.
Tariffs.
Bad.
Russia.
Good.
China.
Bad.
It'll make your head spin. Anyway, I'm being told it's now time for a commercial break.
Friends, there's a new miraculous laundry soap just announced from the laboratories of DuPont Chemical. It's called Fug. From now on, if you can't get the dirt out, fug it.
A round of applause for our announcer, Ron Coleman and his escapees from the Midnight Mission. Hey, you're a really good-looking guy. Have you ever considered having a relationship with a much older woman? We can be very grateful. Well, I'm not surprised. Any man interested in me at this point is dead. Today, my steaks and my sex come the same way, rare. But the good news is that in only 2 years, I will have paid off my student loans. So let's get back to the mail. This one is from Francine Oglethorpe of Savannah, Georgia.
Dear Carol, I know Donald Trump's a leecher, but I voted for him anyway. Is it true that all our presidents have had mistresses?
Thanks for your letter, Sylvia, but the word is lecher, not leecher. She's from Georgia. For you young folks who might not know what a lecher is, it's a man given to excessive sexual indulgence. Kind of defines most guys, doesn't it? So let me try to think of an example. Nah, no one's coming to mind. Sorry. I'm having trouble thinking of the right kind of guy. Anyway, Francine, not all of our presidents have had mistresses. Some have had bimbos. Some have had trollops. Some have had hookers or prostitutes. To my knowledge, none have been gay, but history's a little silent on that subject. But the habits of our current president are quite clear. He likes to grab pussy. His confession clearly recorded for posterity. Now, Donald is on his third wife. He had Ivana and then Marla and now Melania. And we think that early in the year, he was having an affair with Elon. We're not sure who was on top, so we just think of it as two fun-loving, testosterone-filled billionaires swinging their ding-dongs at one another. But the truth is, monogamy among powerful men has always never been popular. Same shit, different decade. In the heyday of the Roaring '20s, President Harding actually built a tunnel under the White House to the nearby Hayes Adams Hotel, where he rotated 5 mistresses. I wasn't one of them. Franklin Roosevelt, despite having polio, canoodled with a very long-time mistress, a girl named Lucy Rutherford, long before he was president. And Eleanor, no longer her husband's favorite cuddle, despite giving him 5 children, seems to have settled down with a woman reporter named Lorena Hickok, quietly acknowledging, "I never met a dyke I didn't like." Those sentiments excluded from her biography. Eisenhower had an extended relationship with his driver, an Irish lass named Kay Summersby. Like everyone else, she liked Dyke. And obviously being away from Mamie for long periods of time had its advantages. But look, he won the war, so it's kind of hard to be upset with his tactics. And Jack Kennedy, handsome, good-looking, tousled hair, publicly in love with his wife Jackie, also shacked up with Marilyn Monroe and Audrey Hepburn, and more than a few other Hollywood A-listers. Then the torch passed to Lyndon Baines Johnson, LBJ. And while Lady Bird was busy cleaning up highways and Vietnam was burning, he was stuffing everything in sight, including a congresswoman. He proudly called his schlong Jumbo and would flash it at the slightest encouragement. Must have made for some really interesting cabinet meetings. Gerald Ford is rumored to have had an affair with an alleged German spy, and the first Bush probably needed solace from someone other than his wife Barbara. And then we come to Bill Clinton. Bill's exploits, they were legendary. He fingered a lot more than his saxophone. And speaking of a saxophone, it's the perfect time for a musical interlude. Ron, the stage is yours. Mics are on. Excuse me. Hello? Carol here. I can't hear you. What's that noise in the background? You're riveting because your name is Rosie. You're Rosie the Riveter.
All the day long, whether rain or shine, she's a part of the assembly line. She's making history, working for victory. Rosie, the riveter, keeps a sharp lookout for sabotage. Sitting up there on the fuselage, that little frail can do more than a male can do. Rosie, the riveter.
It was 1942. The Second World War was a time of jitterbug and jive. A lot of women like Rosie and my mother exchanged their aprons for jobs in factories, replacing the men who had gone off to war. Down the street, we could hear them testing airplane engines, and the movie theaters, giving away dishes and money in between the double feature. Movies, dramatic love stories of men who had gone off to war. American heroism in the air, on land and on ships. Brave white Americans fighting for their country. Meanwhile, here in California, we welcome Mexican families with open arms. I mean, who else would take the shit jobs of picking grapes and harvesting lettuce? And besides, who cared? These people weren't heavy smoking, heavy drinking, white, God-fearing Christians. You know, the ones who had made America great again. So it really didn't matter. And for those next 3+ years, we were united. We were patriotic. We recited the Pledge of Allegiance in our classrooms, and we sang the Star-Spangled Banner at baseball games. Eventually, we allowed 1 million blacks to serve in the military in their own segregated units. The same with the Japanese. They came directly from the internment camps where their families were living. And we asked them all to shed their blood for a country that treated them as less than equal. Hello? Hi, George. George, you know you're calling me while we're on the air. It's George, he's the station manager. What? George, I'm not being sarcastic. No swearing? Okay. Can I say fuck? No? No fucking way. Let's try a different line.
Hi, this is Bob from Brooklyn. Just a quick question. Were things very different after the war?
They were different, but a lot depended on where you were on the food chain. Thanks for your call, Bob. It was 1945 and Germany surrendered in Europe. It was VE Day, Victory in Europe. But there was still that pesky war in the Pacific until we dropped a new type of bomb. We dropped it on 2 Japanese cities and radiated and killed 250,000 people. It launched the atomic age, shocked the entire world, but the war was over. I was a teenager. My older brother was away more than he was at home, having simultaneous orgasms with Shirley and a clarinet. He'd escaped military service, classified 4F, and my mother, widowed now nearly a decade, she bounced from one relationship to another, lascivious with the thought that 7 million men were returning from the war, horny as all get out.
Happy days are here again.
I thought you told me you rehearsed that song.
Well, we did.
That was our very stoned and drunk chorus, all we could afford on our budget. But then America entered the nuclear age. We were the only country left unscathed by the ravages of war. we were filled with optimism. Now we could finally create a better world, a world built on democratic principles, where all people were equal, a brotherhood. Imagine that. But as we told ourselves how high principled we were, the truth was something very different. We were still judgmental about anyone different. Gays moved in the dark. Being a fag was unacceptable. And racism? Racism was still up front and real. Redlining. Blacks, Negroes, coloreds. The names changed, but the results were always the same. Not in my neighborhood. You know, and as late as the 1950s, major corporations like IBM and Disney refused to hire Jews. And women, if you weren't content doing dishes or diapers, the only kind of jobs open to you usually were file clerks. Preconceived ideas, poor paying jobs for women, minorities, people with disabilities. You know, it surrounds us today, a little more subtle. But if you fall into one of those categories, you're always looking behind you, not sure where the next slur is coming from. One way to measure where society was heading was the movies. And growing up, the only actual Indian I ever saw was a handsome man named Jay Silverheels. He was a handsome guy. He played Tonto, the Lone Ranger's sidekick.
The Lone Ranger. Hail Silver! Away!
I still have my silver bullet. Meanwhile, actors like Jeff Chandler and Natalie Wood doused themselves in heavy paint to play the evil or misunderstood savages. Blacks were rarely portrayed as anything other than domestics or drug dealers or killers. One of the really unfortunate casting decisions they made then was to cast beautiful white Ava Gardner to play mixed-race Julie in the blockbuster Showboat, while lovely, perfect fit for the job would have been Lena Horne, a supreme black actress. And like misers hoarding their good fortune, Americans became afraid. Fear. Someone would come out there and hurt us, take our things, all the meaningless goodies that we'd gathered to our bosoms that made us feel better and demonstrated to the world that we were upwardly mobile, moving ahead of the Joneses as if we were in some kind of competitive race. Fear. F-E-A-R. False expectations appearing real. Or my personal favorite, fuck everything and run. So we moved to safer neighborhoods. We built walls. We smoked pot, made love, dropped acid, dropped out. Fear. We built bigger prisons. We jailed more people. Fear. And now that the Soviets had the bomb, we built useless shelters in our backyards. And we learned to duck under our desks at school. It was called MAD. M-A-D. Mutually Assured Destruction. I mean, it's really hard to imagine, but we were scared shitless. I mean, imagine the possibility of being a teenager and fried in a nuclear war while you were still a virgin. Any virgins out there? You don't have to stand, you can just blush. But for once, sanity prevailed. We didn't slaughter one another, but fear didn't go away either. You know, as a result of the war, the rest of the world, friends and enemies, had been flattened by bombs. Their economies destroyed. 60 million people had died. And new countries had popped up all over Europe and Asia as Europe's colonial empire actually dismantled and disintegrated. What had been 73 countries before the war had now ballooned to 200 countries. Some not much larger than a postage stamp. You all remember postage stamps. It's what you used to use for snail mail, if you remember snail mail. But fear permeated everything. So I'm going to tell you a story. There was this one man who lived in the Bay Area. We're going to call him Sammy. Everything in Sammy's life had turned to unmitigated shit, and his only alternative was suicide. So on this dark, foggy night, he walks out on the Golden Gate Bridge and starts to jump. And then he hears this high-pitched, eerie voice coming through the fog. Don't jump! Don't jump! And he hesitates, not sure exactly what's happening. He said, don't jump, my son, don't jump. And he looks around and he can see this really ugly woman, a witch, looking through at him. She says, my son, if you don't jump, I will grant you 3 wishes. Wow. His only other option was suicide. Not sure. He gets down from the bridge. Tell me, my son, tell me, what is your first wish? And he thinks, I'd love the money that I embezzled from my boss would come back and no one would miss it. Done, my son. What is your second wish? He says, I wish that my beautiful wife who ran off with my best friends would come back and have eyes only for me. Done, my son. What is your third wish? He says, I wish I had enough money I'd never have to work again. Done. You have 3 wishes. Can't wait to get away from this woman and find out if it's all true. And as he starts to leave, she says, my son, there's one thing you must do before these wishes take effect. You must make love to me. Oh, God. Nauseous feeling, just terrible, but it's possible. He makes love to her, gets him, starts to lay him, and she says, my son, tell me, how old are you? He says, I'm 50. She says, and at 50, you still believe in witches? Fear will do that to you. Okay, back to the mail. Here's a letter asking whether tariffs are good or bad. It's a good question, and I can tell you because
I've seen this shit before.
see, tariffs are nothing new. They've been around for centuries, but they've always been used prudently. We used them after the war to help the world get on its feet. Globalized trade, we were the biggest beneficiary of it. Today, we're managing to fuck up most of the world's economies, upending long-standing trade relations. Now, these trade relations probably needed changing, but it's not clear that threats were necessary. We used to call it favored nation treatment. We'll help your bankrupt economy improve by buying what you produce, but we won't impose tariffs on things we sell to you. In other words, it balanced. Worked like a charm. Japan thrived in Germany, Great Britain, on into Latin America and Mexico. Throughout the presidencies of Truman and Eisenhower and Kennedy, everybody prospered on into the 60s. We even developed a vaccine for polio. We put a man on the moon. We should have been happy, but we weren't. We were still afraid. We were hiding under those desks worrying about atomic bombs. We panicked that the Soviet Union, who had recently been our ally, now posed a dangerous threat, more fear. They'd built that damn wall in Berlin. They'd thrown an iron curtain across Europe. Now they wanted to soften our brains by putting fluorine in the drinking water, making us all communists. You gotta be alert. Those fucking Reds are everywhere. Hello? George, I'm still on the air. Yes, George, I know. Don't say fuck. Yes, George. No fucking way. Ron, you're not supposed to scowl when you're saying happy face. You know, these days we're doing a lot of, I don't know, what is that word that starts with F and ends ing?
I know.
No, you're all wrong. I'm talking about fracking with an R in it. We're doing a lot of fracking. We're drilling. We're only giving lip service to global warming as the glaciers melt and the oceans rise. Radical weather ravages the planet. But the warnings are not new. I've been hearing this shit for over half a century. You know, as far back as the 1950s, the Chicken Littles of the world told us that the sky was falling in. They said we were destroying the planet with things like pollution and industrialization and too much cow shit oozing methane. What a crazy idea. What a novel thought. I mean, our planet is perfect. Blue skies, blue oceans, endless variety of flora and fauna. I mean, what is this ozone layer thing that they say is warming the planet? And who is Rachel Carson? Why is she writing about threats to our planet? What does she know? And Jacques Cousteau, I mean, he said that we were polluting the ocean with plastic. But what does he know? He doesn't really know. Besides, he's French. They're always emotional and overreacting. I mean, we worried, but we didn't change anything. We just picked up the phone and ordered a pizza. And that nascent fear became paranoia. Paranoia. How do I explain paranoia? It's kind of like fear on LSD. The person next to you is infected, and right now, he's infecting you. A black family has moved next door, and the value of your house has tumbled. That guy in the Tesla, he's pulling out a gun, and he's going to shoot your ass. That's paranoia. Fear of absolutely fucking everything, whether it's rational or not. I mean, just because you think I'm being paranoid doesn't mean someone isn't out to get me. And in the 50s, Americans were afraid of everything. I mean, there were communists everywhere. In the army, our schools, there behind that tree, up that aisle. And especially here in Hollywood. Writers, actors, and directors. I mean, the House Un-American Activities Committee said so. Senator Joe McCarthy said so. Must be true. And we blacklisted anyone who protested. Let me tell you one story. In the early 1940s, the government asked Warner Brothers to produce a pro-Russian movie. Russians good, Germans bad. I mean, the Russians were our allies. They were busy fighting the Nazis. So Warner Brothers does it. It was called Mission to Moscow. And it was two Hollywood A-listers at the time, Walter Houston and Anne Harding. Great movie. Got a lot of press, a lot of favoritism for Russia. A decade later, the same studio gets slammed for being soft on communism. People got fired, blacklisted, lost their careers. I mean, today's crazy, firing qualified employees and replacing them with bimbos and bimbettes, willing to kiss the ring or some other part of the anatomy. I mean, when I tell you that I've seen this shit before, we were afraid of Soviet missiles, East German spies, fluoride in the drinking water to prevent tooth decay, polio vaccines, and other danger. I mean, could vaccines really pose a threat? Polio, smallpox, chickenpox, they'd saved millions of lives. But we were leery. Maybe, just maybe, it was a plot to soften our brains. And trust me, we didn't need much help. More fear, more paranoia. The solution was simple. Bigger defense budgets, better weapons, balancing the budget, not important. We'll show them. You know, when you're older, you need to drink a lot of water. They call it hydrating. A nice 3-syllable word, but they haven't figured out a comparable word for having to pee so much when you keep hydrating. So that means it's a good time for a break. Enjoy, I'll see you back here in 15 minutes.
To ride in my beautiful balloon. Wouldn't you like to ride in my beautiful balloon? Up and away in my beautiful balloon.
Luckily, I like crossword puzzles and reading.
Thank you, Ron. I see that most of you came back. So Miss Piggy and Kermit were making love, and the telephone rang. And Miss Piggy picks it up and she says, "I'm sorry, I can't talk right now. I have a frog in my throat." It's embarrassing to have someone his age tell a dirty joke. Last time I told that joke, I got threatening calls from PETA, Frog Protection Division. So, moving on. It was the late 1960s, and at least we weren't at war. Thank God. I mean, World War II was over, the Korean War was over, and for white middle-class Americans, life was pretty good. We ignored the fact that Arabs and Jews were still killing one another after 80 years, that apartheid violence was rampant in South Africa, that ethnic wars had erupted in Bosnia, Serbia, Uganda, elsewhere. CIA was pushing friendly revolutions in Chile and Nicaragua and Guatemala, and opposing revolutions in Cuba and Southeast Asia. It didn't concern us. I mean, we had cashmere sweaters. We had Sony Walkman. We had big shiny new cars and CinemaScope. Everything around us seemed to be picking up speed. There was a restlessness in the air. I mean, blacks wanted equality. We'd integrated the military and sports, orchestras, but far too many Americans still had their hearts frozen in the past. Racial equality? I mean, what a concept. I was a too tall, 20-ish UCLA girl enjoying life and music and beach and smoking and petting. Oh, yeah. But across the South, Jim Crow laws, segregation, it was like another world. We watched it unfold on our 12-inch black and white television sets. Police dogs, fire hoses, let loose on peaceful protests. Freedom riders were being murdered. And those chasing equality were confronted by those who were still insisting on protecting the status quo. I mean, it shocked us. This wasn't America. We turned off our TV sets, but the images continued to burn inside. Can you possibly imagine? And these days it's back. If you think that roundups of illegal aliens who have been here for decades is any different, you're naive. Attacking any minority seeking peaceful integration was never who we were. And when I see pictures of federal agents hauling away people without due process, I think back to George Wallace standing in front of a college entry blocking integration. You know, at the time I was hopeful that it would pass. But then it didn't. The 1950s passed into the 60s. Music was everywhere. Motown and Smokey Robinson, Brian Wilson and the Beach Boys, Chet Baker and the West Coast Jazz. But it wasn't long before the summer of love turned into a winter of violence. By 1968, violence was everywhere. The conflict in Southeast Asia, now a full war. Anti-Vietnam riots breaking out everywhere. Stonewall gay riots, race riots in major cities, and then Memphis. Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated, and several months later, Bobby Kennedy was assassinated. Our society was shredding, and our hearts were breaking. My life moved forward. I accepted a job with a computer company in Florida. A disaster. Both the computer company and Florida. You know, when I think back on Florida, I realize it was really a great place to live if you were over 65 or your IQ was under. But about this time, abortion and women's rights took center stage. We'd been arguing this issue since I got my first period. In 1972, women finally got equal rights in college sports. It was called Title IX. And look what it spawned today. A wide range of successful women's sports teams, role models for young women. A year later, 1973, we gave a woman the right to control her own body. Dark alleys and wire clothes hangers were no longer the only option. It was a Supreme Court decision called Roe v. Wade. Now that's been overturned and we're back arguing when life begins. It used to be from the womb to the tomb. Now it's from the erection to the resurrection. And if today's shit continues, we may need to get those clothes hangers out of the closet again. So a young man settles into an airline seat for a flight from New York to Los Angeles, gets comfortable, and this lovely young lady comes and sits down next to him. And he's about to make conversation when she sneezes. And she goes, immediately after, she goes, oh my God, oh yes. At which point he turns to a book and occupies himself. About 30,000 feet over, halfway through the country, he decides to talk to her, but once again she sneezes. Oh God, oh yes, returns to his book. But just as they're landing, she sneezes a third time, and he goes, oh yes. He can't resist. He says, are you all right? She says, I'm fine, but every time I sneeze, I have an orgasm. Oh my God, the man says. Is there anything you take for that? Pepper. I know I'll get hollered at later. This letter is from retired Sergeant Pete Phillips, Portland, Oregon.
My father had been killed in Vietnam. I did 2 tours in Afghanistan and another in Iraq. I never understood why I was in either one. How do we become the policeman of the entire fucking world?
Thank you for your service, Sergeant. Great question. You know, actually, all of the presidents, as far back as Harry Truman, had been secretly sending money and military advisors to South Vietnam, part of what had originally been a French colony, Indochina, until the French got their military asses wiped clean. The country's demands were relatively simple. They wanted to be unified, and they wanted an end to foreign involvement. enters the messed up concept called the domino theory. You know, you tip one over and the rest follow. Vietnam, a small canker sore became a flesh-eating alien force, eating young men, letting them die in swamps as we napalmed an entire society we didn't try to understand. And just like the French, we were getting our asses handed to us on a bloody platter. And for the first time, large numbers of Americans learned that our leaders lied with impunity. Victory was never around just the next bombing or a few more planes or another 1,000 soldiers. People protested, but nothing changed.
How many roads must a man walk down before they call him a man? How many seas must a white dove sail before she sleeps in the sand? How many times must the cannonballs fly before they're forever banned? The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind.
Students at Kent State University in Ohio, peacefully protesting the war, were killed by young, frightened National Guardsmen. We cried, but again, nothing changed. We continue to feed more men into that Southeast Asian cauldron. Then there was the draft. But George Bush, Bill Clinton, Donald Trump, they all bought their way out. A few men, heroic men like John McCain, still felt that pang of loyalty. My country, right or wrong, my country. 10,000, tens of thousands of young, loyal Americans fled to Canada to avoid that draft, and 70,000 others would die before all the lies of victory is at hand flowed in a bloody surge. A million Vietnamese would also die just to be free of foreign aggression. But was it necessary? In the end, we left. There had never been any dominoes.
How many years must a mountain exist before it is washed to the sea? How many years can some people exist before they're allowed to be free? How many times can a man turn his head and pretend he just does not see? The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind.
Our battles at home weren't going very well either. Our efforts to desegregate schools, integrate our society, faced heavy resistance, white flight, busing, riots. We had just failed at trying to legislate human conduct. So Sammy Davis Jr., an incredibly talented black performer, was planning to marry a white Swedish model named Mai Britt. Frank Sinatra, Sammy's closest friend, agrees to be best man until there was white angry backlash and Frank backs out. It's got to hurt when your best friend takes asshole opinions against you. Then Sammy Davis Jr. gets on a bus in Mississippi, and the driver says, "Hey, you're black, get to the back of the bus." Sammy says, "But I'm Jewish." He says, "In that case, get the hell off the bus." In 1971, a 7,000-page document called The Pentagon Papers is released. It reveals the plethora of lies that the government had been disgorging on a daily basis. 7,000 pages. End to end, that's 21 football fields of not very light reading. They detailed the history of our country's involvement in Southeast Asia. It had been secretly assembled for a period of months by a whistleblower named Dr. Daniel Ellsberg. He'd taken the job as a pro-war analyst and become an anti-war activist. What followed was one of the great court battles as the Justice Department tried to stop the publication. Too late. Justice Department said, "Forget it, too late." New York Times and Washington Post were already printing it. So now things get really goofy. Early in 1972, a paranoid President Richard Nixon authorizes a couple of rogue CIA agents to bug a nearby office building, the Watergate, which happened to house the Democratic Party. I mean, there was an election coming, and you can't be too careful. They got caught. And like a dog with a bone in its mouth, these young Washington Post reporters wouldn't let the story go. It would lead to a Senate investigation, criminal charges, and the first ever resignation of a sitting president. The size and the energy of the anti-war movement just kept surging. And in April 1973, American troops left. And then Nixon was gone, and the Vietnam War was over. Maybe now things would finally calm down. So about this time, I meet my husband, Al Kossoff. I was in Los Angeles dating. He had been divorced a few years earlier and completed his species' obligatory period of sport fucking. His passion was flying single-engine airplanes, working out at a gym 3 nights a week, and some blackjack. A few months after we met, we're entertaining some friends at my place, and we get into a discussion on whether we can fly to Marietta, where my mother lives, about 100 miles away, faster than we can drive. Without any notice, Al takes half the group, heads for the airport. I take the other half, and we drive. We get there about the same time, but when it's time to leave, he puts aluminum foil on the top of my car. He's going to follow me up Highway 15. About halfway up, I see him, he's overhead, but he's flying too low. And he trips an Edison power line and starts a brush fire that endangers 12 homes. Fortunately, the airplane didn't flip, but it is in trouble. And I see him going to the nearest airport, which was Corona, and so we follow him there. We get there, and we're looking at the airplane, and there's no more brakes. They'd been severed. And then we hear a siren. It's the California Highway Patrol. And they've come to arrest him. They've come to arrest him for reckless flying. Now, there is no such law, but outside of that fiction, they ask him for identification. And they make him pull out his driver's license, and he shows it to them. And then I know the truth. The son of a bitch has been lying about his age by 7 years, and I'd only been lying by 5. I mean, how dare he? I didn't care that he was being carted off to the Riverside jail. He'd lied more than I had. Men aren't supposed to do that. Through the years, his flying escapades continued. He'd land too fast in the water, in a cornfield, or without putting the landing gear down. But the 2 decades we spent together, they were magic. In 2006, Parkinson's and cancer took him from me. The world moved on. There was turmoil. A revolution in Iran cost Carter a re-election. He was followed by an actor who traded arms for drugs to support a revolution in Nicaragua. And then a new plague erupted, AIDS. Entire segments of our population began dying, mostly homosexual men and IV drug users. And in those first years, when it might have made a big difference, conservative Reagan refused to acknowledge its presence. Religious bigots said it was God's will for blasphemous behavior. I mean, after all, it was in the Bible. Leviticus said so. Fuck Leviticus. People we loved were dying. And worldwide, more than 40 million people have died of AIDS.
You are so beautiful, beautiful to me. You are so beautiful, beautiful to me. Can't you see? You're everything I hope for, everything I need. You are so beautiful to me.
Early 1990s, the Soviet Union imploded and became Russia and 15 separate countries spread across Europe and Asia. Maybe now world peace would finally be at hand. But we just couldn't leave well enough alone. Fear. We've got to stop them before they take over another country or build a bomb or some other fucking excuse. First it was Afghanistan, then Desert Storm, Operation Enduring Freedom, Iraqi Freedom, Desert Shield. A blather of Madison Avenue slogans, bullshit lathered in oil and weapons contracts. We never learned. And then, out of nowhere, from the most unlikely state in the Union, Arkansas, a new face appears. William Jefferson Clinton. Bill campaigned with 4 words. 4 words. It's the economy, stupid. He was different. He played saxophone. He had an office in Harlem. He'd been a wonder kid, a Rhodes Scholar. We were really hopeful. But then came Monica Lewinsky and the blue dress. And we forgot about balanced budgets, and we focused on blowjobs. Blowjobs, grabbing pussy. I mean, they both come from the same place. Too much testosterone. Then more shit. 2001, another tragedy. Airplanes commandeered by terrorists deliberately flew into Manhattan's World Trade Center and killed almost 3,000 people. New fears. Shoes off at the airport. 3-inch bottles of liquid, a no-no. More fear. Bigger defense budgets. The tragedy played into our fears with surgical precision. More wars, more aggression. Hadn't we had enough? The deficit ballooned even further. $1 billion bombers, bigger missiles, nuclear submarines. Nothing justifies spending like fear. And in the background, a noise, a drumbeat most of us chose to ignore. The planet was getting warmer. Glaciers were melting and oceans were rising. Cows were producing more methane than milk. I mean, Al Gore had called it an inconvenient truth. So let me enlighten you. There's 6+ billion people on the planet. 2 billion of them get their drinking water from the snow melt of the Himalayas. 1 billion on the east side, where it becomes the Yangtze and the Mekong. 1 billion on the west side, where it becomes the Ganges and the Indus. The glaciers that produce that have now retreated 12 miles and produce only 2/3 of the water that they used to produce. Meanwhile, major cities like Kabul and Cape Town have had to truck in millions of gallons of water daily to feed the population whenever there's a drought. The Colorado River that feeds us here is dangerously low. But fuck it, I like green lawns. Then a shock. From nowhere, an erudite young man with a beautiful wife and 2 beautiful daughters emerges. Super dude, Barack Obama. He would become our first black president. And once again, we hoped. Our country might finally be that shiny example at the top of the mountain. Only we weren't. We were as racist as ever, with hatred leaching out from the sewers as it had for 2 centuries. He tried. He really tried. But sometimes the best intentions just aren't enough.
I've seen fire and I've seen rain. I've seen sunny days that I thought would never end. I've seen lonely nights when I could not find a friend. But I always thought that I'd see you again.
Early in 2006, my life changed. In one 2-week period, my husband, my mother, and my brother died. It was a trifecta. I cried. I sat for hours staring into space, and then I cried some more. I mean, what do you do with your life when everyone in it who matters is suddenly taken from you? A few months later, I heard this notice on NPR. It was a charity looking for volunteers. I called them and asked if they'd like an old broad who was a bad Jew. And 2 months later, at the age of 73, I arrived in Cape Town, South Africa. I was 10,000 miles from everyone I knew. Had to have been the dumbest thing I'd ever done. I cried, but when I woke up the next morning and went to work, I was teaching in black townships in a country that was still reeling from a half century of apartheid and a decade of AIDS. The experience changed my life. I mean, I taught, I sat with seniors, I cuddled children with fetal alcohol syndrome. My life had meaning. And the experience of working with these amazing people became my first book and my first stage play. Then I kept writing. A little ADHD, I think. I was working with seniors and underprivileged. One book I wrote by one vote told 12 true stories of events in American history that had happened by one vote. And another book, When Stars Align, was the love story of a mixed-race boy and a white girl during the Civil War. I had stories I needed to tell. So Max and Sadie were driving down to Florida for a vacation, the way all the old Jews in the Northeast used to do. And in Georgia, they get pulled over by a police officer. Sadie, who had been driving, rolls down a window. "Do you know you've been speeding?" the policeman says. She says, "What did he say?" He said, "You were speeding." "Ah. Can I see your license and registration?" the officer asked. "What did he say?" He says he wants to see your license and registration. He looks at him and says, "Oh, you folks are from New Jersey." "I dated a woman from New Jersey. It was the worst sex I ever had." "What did he say?" He says he knows you. Anyway, as I settled back into what were supposed to be my golden years, I found myself in the middle of a new generation. Young people growing up with cell phones, the internet, Facebook, TikTok, rap music, vaping, fentanyl, and their own language that parents couldn't decipher. You know, I'd been fortunate. I'd had an amazing marriage. I traveled the world, more than 90 countries. I've seen great art, great vistas, and I met marvelous people. I also have to acknowledge that I've had a lot more yesterdays than I'm likely to have tomorrows. But fuck it, I mean, we're all gonna die. So I evolved my own personal philosophy. I don't mind dying, but I refuse to give up living. And as I may have mentioned before, I've seen these people. An almost nuclear holocaust, civil unrest, attack on the Capitol. Do I worry? I do, but not for myself, but for the generation X and Y and the rest of the fucking alphabet.
Just yesterday morning, I didn't know you were gone. Seems that the plans they made put an end to you. I walked out this morning and I wrote down this song. Just can't remember who to send it to. I've seen fire and I've seen rain. I've seen sunny days that I thought would never end. Seen lonely nights when I could not find a friend. But I always thought that I'd see you again.
Our country was established by 7 million men who looked alike. Today we have 350 million people who don't look like one another. They're very different. Different views of the world, the future, and how they fit into it. And it isn't entirely clear that the ideals that we set up 200 years ago can still work. Are things screwed up today? Undeniably, yes. War in Ukraine is in its third year. Palestinians Israelis, everybody, they're still at war. Fires rage across the West, floods across the Midwest. And the Supreme Court that reversed Roe v. Wade is now intent on considering reversing same-sex marriage. That's a lot of shit to deal with. More than in the past? No, not really. I mean, we've lived through Great Depressions, world wars, nuclear threats, and bad presidents. Today we're trying to live with new technologies, a warming planet, and a very unorthodox president. Is he a danger to our democracy? Nearly half the country doesn't think so. Our greatest danger is the increasing divisiveness and anger in the society. Those with and those without, the educational gap, the cultural gap, left-wing liberals and tight-ass conservatives. Those with convictions that drown out any dissent. My biggest fear is that we've lost empathy. We've lost that sense of community. This isn't the first time. That shit's been going on forever. It isn't the government that's the problem. It's us. Shakespeare wrote in Julius Caesar, "The fault, dear Brutus, is not in the stars. It is in ourselves." We're an experiment in self-government. I wrote a little limerick. I've seen this shit before, I swear. The pompous strut, the vacant stares. The plot is thin, the script recycled. The outraged stage, the logic stifled. It's history's rerun, and no one cares. So, I hope I made you smile a little. Sleep comfortably tonight, knowing that tomorrow when you wake up, our traffic will still be shitty. But the sun will be shining. Thank you. Please join us next door for champagne and cake. How are you?
I missed the first half.
Oh, well, we'll do it again for you.
Okay, good.